Hello, welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast, where we weave the key transits of the week ahead into the rhythm of the lunar phases. I am your host, Sarah Paasch, and this week we're getting into the full moon phase of this Cancer lunar cycle. If you were with us last week, you know that we introduced the new big player in the outer transit game, which is Uranus into Gemini. I had an amazing time in my happy hour episode with Whitney Cran's amazing astrologer. So if you didn't already get a chance to check out that episode and get all the deets and the style tips for the transits last week, go ahead and check that out on the channel. And we know that Uranus in Gemini is starting a new 8-year transit, a whole new 8-year cycle of change and disruption. So this is a whole new area of our charts, and potentially if we have planets there, then there's a whole new Uranus transit that we're going through. And so if you're looking to better understand what this transit means for you specifically, you can book a one-on-one consultation with me. That's linked below. Together, we can look at what planets and houses Uranus and Gemini is going to be renovating. And also, I can offer some specific timing and considerations for you based off of that transit, that place in your chart, and any planets that need to be considered. So check that out in the link below if you're somebody who's wanting to get a little bit more support or guidance in the Uranus and Gemini cycle. And since Monday, I'm curious. Monday, July 7th, Uranus is officially in Gemini. It's been a few days. Do you feel a shift? Comment below what you're feeling or anything new that you are tuning into with the Uranus and Gemini transit or change. For this week's episode, we are focused on that Capricorn full moon and all things Saturn. This is a week for Saturn. It's kind of funny because the first week in the Cancer lunar cycle, we were like, this is a week for Mercury. And then the second week, we were like, this is a week for Venus. And this week, it's a week for Saturn. So this is a Capricorn full moon, and a full moon to remind us at this phase in any lunar cycle, we're always at this point of peak illumination in the cycle. This is the point at a full moon where there is a culmination of clarity that gives us a reflection around the things that are really working right now and the things that maybe aren't working that need to either be adjusted or released. So we're really coming into this week with the opportunity to be presented with some potentially constructive feedback, because this is very Saturnian in nature, around what it is that we need to do or adjust in order to really sustain the growth for the long term. A Capricorn full moon is always emphasizing themes of ambition, responsibility, what we need to do for long-term success, so strategy and foresight. Something that's kind of interesting to note about the significance of this Capricorn full moon is that the previous new moon in Capricorn on December 30th, 2024, yes, and the future Capricorn new moon, both of those new moon lunations are going to be ruled by a Saturn in Pisces. So this is the first Capricorn Saturn ruled lunation that we've had with Saturn in a new sign, in new territory, with new lessons in Aries. And it's also standing at this threshold between these two new moons in Capricorn that are still tethered and anchored into the Saturn and Pisces lessons. So considering that, with the addition that the ruler Saturn in Aries is actually stationing retrograde in just a couple days after this full moon, this Capricorn full moon is pulling focus on the quality control necessary for supporting success and scaling from one level of success to the next. We're going to dive into what that really means and all the astrological nuances, but I wanted to start before we dive in with this quote that I have for you. It comes from the 2024 McKinsey & Company research. Only 22% of new businesses successfully scale, yet scaling creates 2/3 of their long-term value. I'm going to say that again. Only 22%. So less than a quarter fraction of new businesses successfully scale. Yet, scaling creates 2/3 of their long-term value. My title for this Capricorn full moon week is Healthy Hesitation. And we're going to break down what that means and the ways in which this week's astrology has some of that constructive feedback for us to consider if we're serious about scaling forward successfully. If you're enjoying my weekly podcast, it would mean so much. It really helps my channel if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, sharing this video really helps my channel out a lot. So your support means the most to me. I'm going to be here regardless because I'm obviously just obsessed with astrology and I'm just excited to get to share it with anybody. So we begin this week on Thursday, July 10th with that Capricorn full moon at 18 degrees. It culminates exact at 1:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. As I mentioned before, the ruler of this Capricorn full moon is Saturn, and Saturn is currently in Aries. So one of the main things and kind of backdrops that this full moon is illuminating and presenting with us is the themes of the tension that inherently exist between Aries and Capricorn. Aries is a cardinal fire sign, the first sign of the zodiac, and Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. Some of the core tensions that just exist between Aries and Capricorn are these themes of initiating versus building, starting versus sustaining, desire versus duty. So this Capricorn full moon with this healthy hesitation, we are going to be shown where exactly breakdowns might be stemming and where they're rooted from this overemphasis on either side of that Aries and Capricorn equation. And the question we're really needing to contend with is back to that quote on successful scaling is, in order to scale and grow effectively, we have to honor the value of both. We have to equally recognize where it's important to initiate. We can't just keep doing the same thing we've always done and expect something different, right? We can't just keep building. We have to initiate sometimes. We have to pivot. And we also just can't keep starting something that we're excited about. We can't just follow the instinct of our desire without the consideration of what it's going to take to sustain that, the responsibility and the duty that is requiring from us. So the first question that I offer to you for this full moon is, do you feel that you might be giving your energy and attention to one side of this equation more than the other? And if yes, how could that negatively impact the long-term outcomes if they aren't addressed? And before I even continue, I thought it might be helpful if I give you some examples of like the scaling metaphor that we're talking about with this Capricorn full moon. Because the obvious one is when we think of a company scaling. We think of a company or an organization that is wanting to increase sales, wanting to increase numbers, increase outcomes. And they're doing so maybe at a cost to the systems or the culture of the organization, of the company. Another one might be that you are looking for a new fitness routine. And so you really want to initiate something new. You want to start working out more. You want to start increasing the amount of maybe exercise that you're already doing. But if you do it at such a rate that you don't take into consideration the consistency and endurance that that's going to take, then that's going to lead to burnout, trying to go from like 0 to 100. Somebody who doesn't work out saying, I'm going to work out 5 times a week and, go on this really strict meal plan. Research has proven, and also life experience if you're like me, like that doesn't work. It fails every time. It's really exciting in the beginning, but it never actually lasts or sustains. Another one might be, getting into new relationships, the introduction of new relationships or connections. Think of like somebody who falls in love and it's moving really fast. It's really exciting. And you're already start to build a future vision in your mind or with the other person. You're already talking about and imagining that future, but you haven't actually known each other for enough time to build trust. So these are kind of these different ideas we can think of with scaling that's not just related to a company or an organization. It can be in all these different areas, anywhere in our life where there's this tension between what we're beginning and what we're excited about, what we're really looking towards growing, and also what it's going to require in a ecosystem way to have something that's really sustainable and to make sure that there is a cohesive picture included in that introduction or integration of the new into what's already here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and continue on to the astrology with this full moon. The next thing about this Capricorn full moon that informs us is the ruler Saturn. So Saturn at the time of this full moon, as we know, is in Aries, which is its place of fall. This is the place where Saturn is said to have the most difficult time. And that's because in Aries, the things that Saturn is here to do, Saturn does not have any resources to do that. Aries is here to like get up and go. Aries is here to initiate. Aries is like, I have an idea, I'm going to go for it. Instead of asking for permission, I'll ask for forgiveness later. That's Aries. Saturn is the ultimate taskmaster. Saturn is the wise elder. It is the planet that brings material reward and consequences because of consistent repetition and action and choices. Saturn is here to really deliver those rewards over time. Even in the natal context, we always want to say, make sure that you give that Saturn time. It's always difficult to really get the juice of the Saturnian labors when you haven't had enough time for them to really come into a place of maturity and fruition. And so Saturn in Aries struggles because it doesn't have that instinct for time. There's an instinct for rushing, potentially, and desire can outweigh duty. The other thing about a planet in its fall is this idea of disintegration. And that's amplified by the fact that Saturn in Aries, as the ruler of this full moon, is in that conjunction nearly exact. It's the closest that it's going to get before it becomes exact in February 2026. With Neptune in Aries. And Neptune, again, dissolves and brings this potential inability to see clearly for Saturn in Aries. There's an increased chance of us being in a fog with Neptune, a fog of disillusionment or ideals. We might be really, really excited about something, but that could kind of be like this tunnel vision, preventing our ability to have a more holistic perspective of holding what it is that we're moving towards or wanting to build. And that's amplifying that Saturn and that Aries energy, right? And so all of these things that we take into consideration that are impacting the ruler of this full moon and Saturn at this time really inform us that we need to check ourselves. Like, we need to check where we might be overconfident in the Saturn and Aries way and be open to receiving some of this constructive feedback that could be available during this full moon. The potential of a planet in its fall is that there can literally be like a fall from grace. It can literally be like suddenly the things that this planet wasn't recognizing weren't working, kind of bite it in the ass, so to speak. But the thing that I think is so loving and compassionate about this Capricorn full moon, ruled by that Saturn in Aries, is it feels like this really loving, intentional pause to give you the feedback to prevent a fall. To say, hey, babe, like if you don't listen now, it will break later. There will be an inevitable fail or dissolution or disintegration of what you've worked so hard to get to this point. It feels like this incredible gift, honestly, of clarity and illumination. And so the reason I really think that, especially for this full moon, is because of where and who we look for help to that Saturn in Aries. And that's really going to be Jupiter. And the reason why, as an astrologer, this is really speaking to me this way is because at the time of the full moon, we've got Jupiter exalted in Cancer, which means that Jupiter in Cancer is receiving this Capricorn full moon. It's like having a direct line of communication and resourcing to the person that knows exactly what it is you need and where to get it, because it's like they're staying in your house while you're on vacation. So you can just give them a call and they can kind of take care of that thing that you might have forgot to do before you left. And on top of that, Saturn in Aries, in the early degrees of Aries, is actually in the bounds of Jupiter. And the bounds is a form of dignity in astrology that really has this feeling of kind of being like the supervisor, like the supervising manager of that location. If you think about like a corporation, like Super Target, there's like a CEO of Super Target and all the Super Targets, but there's only one general manager per store, per location. And so the people who work at that specific Target, the people who work for Target, yeah, they work for the CEO of Target, but really, who do they work for? Who do they clock in every day? And who manages them and tells them, their tasks for the day and when they can leave work? That's the supervisor. That's the general manager. And for Saturn and Aries, that's Jupiter. What a freaking blessing, because Jupiter is in Cancer exalted. So even though this is ruled by Saturn and Aries, even though it's a maybe difficult full moon, the truth is that we have the help we need if we're open to hearing it. If we don't try to have a power struggle with the authority of a different supervisor or perspective of somebody else that might be able to give us a little bit greater sense of what's missing or what's needed, then this full moon can literally save us. It can be like a saving grace from a future failure down the road. So when I'm thinking about Jupiter in Cancer as this supervisor that has the potential to help us, to kind of give us a new perspective or supportive insight into what we need for this successful scaling, I'm thinking about the voice of mother wisdom, this voice of nurturing and relationship or connection. I was kind of getting this image of Saturn and Aries being this dad who is like a sports dad, who is like the best coach ever, so good at encouraging the child into developing their skill, into getting motivated and competitive for the game, making sure that they're practicing when they don't have a match that day. And it's kind of like the the dad has been doing these drills with this kid outside on a hot summer day. And this kid is like just trying so hard to perform for their dad and like do a good job and get better that they're too afraid to admit that they are freaking exhausted. Like they're tired, they're hungry, and they're thirsty. And this is kind of like that moment where like I imagine a mom just opens the back door of the house to the kids and the dad playing outside. And she comes outside and she has like this tray of snacks and this pitcher of like cold lemonade. And she's just like, "Hi, it's really hot out here. Do you guys want to take a break? I made some snacks, some sandwiches, and I've got some ice cold lemonade." And even the dad has to admit that sounds pretty good right now. So there's like this feminine, mothering, nurturing voice and wisdom that is seeking to come in. This Jupiter in Cancer is really asking for us to be available to receive that help and to receive that wisdom. And so another question that I wanted to invite you into for this full moon with that Jupiter in Cancer is, if I slow down and I listen with love, is there a voice that wants me to hear how I can help bring more stability and care into this equation of what I want to scale, what I want to start, what I want to grow, right? And it could be a voice that's internal, or it could also be somebody outside of yourself. Is there somebody who's been trying to get a hold of you and you just keep missing that call, or you keep putting off and procrastinating scheduling that connection time? That might be the very person that has some of the wisdom that will save you in the long run. And then how can I integrate more nurturing into what has helped me grow to this place as a way to fortify where I seek to grow in the future? And this is really bringing the part that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, which is that the bookending new moon lunations in Capricorn for this full moon, so the previous new moon in Capricorn and the following one in 2026, both of these new moons in Capricorn are ruled by Saturn in Pisces. And so Saturn is not quite done in Pisces. And so I want you to think about how much you developed, matured, or were able to grow. Like, what have you been rewarded by since that Saturn in Pisces transit started? Thinking back to March 2023, when Saturn first started that transit, take a moment to look back and see how far you've come. In what ways have you been successful? How has that success led you to where you are now and kind of served as this stage to inspire and excite you for that eagerness of where you want to go next, of what you want to initiate with that Saturn in Aries? And knowing Saturn's going to dip back into Pisces, knowing that we aren't quite done with that transit, we still have one final phase of completion with Saturn in Pisces, then this is where I ask the question again at this full moon, or you can ask yourself, how can I integrate more nurturing into what has helped me grow to this place as a way to fortify where I seek to grow in the future? Okay, so that leads us to the third and final piece of this puzzle for the full moon, and actually to the next major day, major transit of the week, which is on Saturday, July 12th. Saturn is going to station retrograde at 1 degrees of Aries. When a planet stations retrograde, for the few days before and after that it actually changes its direction, it has a change in speed. So before that planet can station, either retrograde or direct, it needs to almost come to a complete appearance of a stop in the sky. And so not only is Saturn stationing retrograde, and that ties in, we'll get there, but it's stationing at the time of this full moon. It is slowing down almost to a halt direct in order to turn directions. And so as it's preparing to move directions, to move retrograde or what appears to be backwards in our sky, it's also pointing to this power for us at the time of the Capricorn full moon to slow down and to turn inward for greater clarity. And just to clarify, Saturn is going to station direct on November 27th at 25 degrees of Pisces. So Saturn will be retrograde from this Saturday, July 12th, all the way and through November 27th. Saturn retrograde is initiating a cycle of integration and also, like I mentioned, that Saturn in Pisces completion. We need to pause and do some integration work around what Saturn in Aries has started for us before we can really build forward with Saturn in Aries. So some ways you can think about this is since May, end of May 2025, so really just for the last month and a half or so since Saturn entered Aries, have you been presented with any new obvious, maybe not so obvious, but probably obvious Saturn in Aries lessons? What have those lessons been? Have you been presented with any new Saturnian limitations? Whether it's a limitation that is internal, that you're realizing it's a threshold I'm being called to overcome, to challenge, or maybe it's a need for greater boundaries and an honoring of your current limitations. Has Saturn in Aries brought any new awareness around certain fears or doubts? And are there any places that Saturn in Aries is already foreshadowing that you will be required to engage with greater levels of maturity, probably in that Aries area of your chart especially, in order to be rewarded with Saturn from that transit? If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you check out that Saturn in Aries webinar digital product that's on my website. It's linked below. It's just $33 and it literally is going to set you up really for any Saturn transit, but especially for the Saturn in Aries transit. This is a 3-year transit that we're all going to be living through, and a Saturn retrograde is a perfect time to do that background preparation work or learning in order to really build the most consciously and effectively with Saturn once it stations direct and really enters Aries for the official time without ever going back. Once Saturn stations retrograde, this is the window of time that we are also going to see the closest point that Saturn and Neptune will get to that conjunction until that February conjunction where it becomes exact. So this is also a moment while Saturn is stationing to kind of really step back and reflect and take note. What are some of the things that are kind of foreshadowing that are going to be coming back in a full circle way and really become real when it comes to February 2026? And how is whatever is coming up during this Saturn station, during this Capricorn full moon, what clarity can I take? What constructive feedback can I receive? And how can I work with Saturn retrograde over the next few months, that cycle, to intend to really fortify and stabilize for successful scaling going forward? So really just not being afraid to slow down, I think is a theme. And then that really brings us to the full circle moment of this week, which I think is another just layer and amplification. The astrology is speaking to that relationship between Saturn and Aries and the Jupiter in Cancer from the night hours of the 15th into Wednesday, July 16th. Two things are happening at the exact same time. The first thing is that the moon enters Aries and makes a conjunction with that Saturn that just stationed retrograde and Neptune retrograde at the same time that Jupiter in Cancer becomes visible in the sky. If you were with us a couple of weeks ago, we spent a lot of time talking about when Jupiter had this thing called a cazimi. And that's the moment when a planet crosses through the heart of the sun or comes into a conjunction with the sun and it resets its cycle with the sun. And during that time, the planet is going through this process of rebirth and regeneration. It's resetting. And because of its proximity to the sun, during the time of a cazimi, we actually can't see that planet. It becomes invisible during that healing journey, that healing rebirth phase. And it's not until that planet gets at least 15 degrees away from the sun that it's really reborn in the sky, visible to us. And so that's really the moment where we get that reborn, regenerated Jupiter in Cancer fully activated, fully empowered to show us, right? To really manifest and begin to deliver some more maybe obvious, tangible ways of the good that Jupiter in Cancer wants to do, or how we might access the support or resources to receive that. So I really encourage everybody as we come towards the end of this full moon week before entering into the third quarter phase, on Wednesday, really starting on Wednesday, you can really use this meditation with the sky. And if you aren't somebody that looks at the sky or tracks the planets, it's okay. Like, no shame, no pressure. And also, this week would be a perfect time to play with it. And so what I would encourage you to do is to kind of twofold. On one hand, there's this conversation and contemplation that we can practice meditating with Jupiter as it rises as a morning star. So waking up just before sunrise, if you get out before sunrise, you'll be able to see Jupiter in the sky before the sun. And really with this Jupiter rising, we can start to just kind of meditate on some of the Jupiter and Cancer questions and prompts that I've been promoting and sitting with myself since the Cancer new moon. And so I'll share those with you right now. Meditating with Jupiter rising in the morning sky. What is my priority to nourish and protect? What would it take to feel more stability through ways of change and growth? And what would it be like to receive more than enough support? So really opening ourselves. Maybe there's a different contemplation or meditation that comes to you. I obviously encourage you to follow and trust your gut, your intuition, and to just open ourselves. Maybe we go just completely blank and just observe and see what comes. And then on the other hand, at night, after the sun sets, we can look to the sky at that waning full moon and Saturn that we know is stationed retrograde. And we can sit with some meditations or contemplations. These are what I offer to you. How can I mature my relationship to my desires? What will it take for me to sustain what I'm eager to initiate? What would it take to be realistic and hopeful about my dreams for the future? And I also think that included in both the moon conjuncting and crossing that Saturn Neptune retrograde in Aries, as well as Jupiter rising as the morning star, both of these things are very lunar and relational in tone and in feeling and in meaning. The intention can also to be given a sense of remembrance around the connections that are really here with us and for us, the people that really deserve our commitment, our tending, our care, and really remembering that no matter where we go or what we do, how much money we make, how much success or accolades that we get, I think the greatest thing that Jupiter in Cancer really wants us to remember is that legacy, like true legacy, is built on more of a lasting impact after we're gone. And it's the people that we touch. It's the memories that we participate in creating together. I imagine those are the things that really matter. Those are the things that people remember, the things that really touch each other. And so maybe this is also a moment to just tap into that remembering of a deeper purpose, a deeper why. What is the true meaning of what you're so excited at starting? What is the deeper meaning or purpose behind any sort of ideals or ambitions that you're really excited about going towards? This is a moment to really drop in and to come back to that why, come back to that purpose, and come back to the relationship, both with our ambitions and ourselves and our bodies, especially, but also each other, like who matters and why does this matter? All right. So that culminates the full moon week. And just to really seal in this quote, I'm going to give it to you one more time to close out this Capricorn full moon, which is that only 22% of new businesses successfully scale, yet scaling creates 2/3 of their long-term value. So while this week might feel frustrating to those of us who are just eager to initiate or to move forward, I'm really here to remind you of what I see the astrology speaking to and inviting, which is that loving invitation for consideration, that healthy hesitation, coming back to the purpose of why we do what we do, who it matters to and for, and if we really want it to last, what is that going to require? What is the nurturing and the care that needs to be included in this equation? If you're feeling this Capricorn full moon, comment below. What are you feeling? Are you feeling the Saturn in Aries or the Jupiter in Cancer more? If you get to go outside and you watch the sky and you do any meditation, I'd love to hear if the planets say anything to you. And again, thank you so much. If you like this week's episode and you enjoy this weekly podcast, it really helps so much if you can like this video, subscribe, or even share the video with friends. The more that you engage with these videos and my channel, the greater chance that it has to grow and be received by more people across the board and across the world. So thank you so much for being here with me today. Next week, we're going to get into that third quarter lunar phase of this lunar cycle. And on the day of the third quarter moon, we've got Mercury starting its retrograde. So we're going to go into all the details of the Mercury retrograde and also the sun entering into Leo, which is so exciting. I love Leo season. It's going to be hot. It's going to be feisty, and there's going to be a few things that we got to work out before we can really have just a fun, flirtatious Leo season. Something else I forget to mention in these episodes is if you don't read my entire YouTube description all the way to the bottom of About Me, I share how much I'm obsessed with music. Music is kind of like the sister love obsession to astrology for me. And so I've started creating these playlists on Spotify, these custom playlists curated and created in relationship to the energy of the astrology for each lunar cycle. So I've created a playlist with the Cancer new moon lunar cycle. It's still completely relevant during this time and all the way through the cycle. The playlist is really intended to hold you through that cycle in all the phases, whether it's needing to cry, rest, dance, inspire. All the vibes are in the playlist. So I'll make sure that's linked below as well. You can find all of my information below. I hope to see you next week here in the comments below or engaging with me on social media. Thank you all so much, and happy Capricorn full moon to everybody.